Exposed. How one Christmas dinner revelation turned my life around after being called useless. Jake Thompson stood at the kitchen door, the aroma of baked turkey and sweet potatoes wrapping around him like a warm fleece blanket. Yet, that warm comfort only highlighted the chill seeping through his heart. Christmas was supposed to be a time of joy, but for Jake, the festive spirit was nothing but an oppressive cloud of expectations, especially from his younger brother Mark. Each year, Jake felt like a shadow compared to Mark's dazzling accomplishments, a high-flying executive, all smiles and ambitions, while Jake felt trapped under the weight of his own perceived failures as a mechanic in their quaint Midwestern town. Today was no different. As he stepped into the house decorated with cheerful garlands and twinkling lights, Jake's stomach twisted in knots. The laughter and warmth surrounded him, but an undercurrent of tension made it feel like a trap. He greeted his mother, her determined spirit shining through wrinkles earned from years of hard work and perseverance in the military. She pulled him into a tight hug, whispering words of love that momentarily soothed him. In her gaze, however, he sensed the weight of unfulfilled dreams. The dining table was a feast for the senses, shimmering in hues of red and gold, yet feeling stark against Jake's crumbling self-worth. As everyone settled down, laughter filled the air. But when Mark stood to give a toast, that laughter turned to ashes in Jake's mouth. With undeniable charisma, Mark lauded his recent promotion and holiday vacations. Each word felt like a punch, a reminder that Jake was still just fixing cars and struggling to make ends meet. Feeling the pulse quicken in his chest, Jake shifted uncomfortably in his chair. The room simply drowned out his silent battle. A whirlwind of emotions swirled within him. Without thinking, he blurted out the frustrations bottled within him. "Do you ever realize how hard it is for me? You stand there, flaunting everything, and I'm just nothing." Silence engulfed the room like a suffocating blanket. Faces froze in shock, forks hanging midair, as the tension escalated like a summer storm. Then, like thunder breaking through, their neighbors barged in, sensing the commotion. Their supportive voices cut through the heaviness. "Jake, you're an incredible mechanic. You've helped so many in this community." The sudden rush of warmth from his neighbors ignited something deep within him. It dawned on Jake that his worth wasn't tethered to Mark's success, but was found in the kindness he offered, the way people turned to him for help. "Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen." Now let's continue. As the neighbors rallied around him, the echoes of his mother's lessons about resilience rang true. The once crushing storm of inadequacy began to transform into a glimmer of hope. Jake realized that the struggles he had faced were not failures, but the very foundation of who he was becoming. However, the unresolved animosity with his family loomed large. Would this newfound support from his community be enough to help him bridge the gap between the love of his family and his own sense of identity? Standing at this precipice, Jake felt the weight of judgment still pressing down on him. But for the first time, hope flickered in the depths of his heart. The following minutes felt like a blur. The warm words of support from his neighbors washed over him, and he found himself swept away by a tide of gratitude. Jake sat there, blinking against the flickering lights above, struggling to process the shift that had just unfolded. It was almost surreal, and for a moment he lost sight of the dinner table bubbling with laughter and chatter. His eyes drifted to Mark, who had resumed the toast with an awkward smile plastered over shock and confusion. Cheers to family." Mark stumbled over his words, clearly caught off guard by the whole scene. Jake could see the tension in his brother's posture, the way he looked between Jake and the neighbors. Did he finally get it? Did Mark understand the pain he had inflicted? "Yeah, cheers to that," Jake muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. For the first time, he was determined to no longer cower under the shadow of Mark's success. As the meal continued, he felt the corners of his heart softening. Instead of feeling distant, he found himself engaging with those around him, sharing stories of the cars he'd worked on and the families he'd helped keep safe on the roads. Laughter erupted as he animatedly recounted a tale of a stubborn engine that refused to start, which had ended up with an impromptu snowball fight with the customer's kid. This was his world, real, messy, and filled with genuine connection. Yet, as the laughter faded, Jake felt the eye of the storm looming. It was still there, the unspoken feud with his brother. He didn't want to destroy the Christmas spirit again, but he knew they needed to talk. With a deep breath, he finally turned to Mark. "Listen, can we talk?" The question slipped out almost nervously. Breaking through the pleasant chatter around them, Mark nodded, his expression shifting from surprise to a hint of apprehension. "Yeah, okay. After dinner?" Jake felt a flicker of relief. They were at least willing to try. The rest of the dinner passed in a haze of flavors and sounds, but the urgency of what lay ahead weighed heavier with each bite. He watched the way his family interacted, their smiles brightening the space, yet he couldn't shake the feeling of being on the outside looking in. When dinner wrapped, Jake excused himself and stepped outside onto the porch to take a breath of fresh air. The cold stung his skin, but it grounded him. He could hear the soft sounds of Christmas carols drifting through the window, joyful and cheery, which reminded him of everything he longed for but often felt too distant. Mark joined him moments later, his expression unreadable. They stood side by side under twinkling lights that strung across the porch, the weight of the world hanging between them. Jake felt the tension build, a palpable energy that demanded release. "About what I said earlier," Jake started, but Mark interrupted. "Wait. Before you say anything, I'm sorry," Mark said, his voice low but steady. "I never realized how much pressure I put on you. It wasn't right." Jake's heart hammered in his chest. Was Mark finally acknowledging the truth? As Jake turned to face him, ready to speak about his struggles, the moment seemed fragile, as if the wind could scatter their words like snowflakes. He didn't want this to slip away, but the chance to mend their relationship felt tangible. But just when it seemed they would have a breakthrough, a figure hurried past the lit windows of the house shouting, frenzied sounds cutting through their conversation. "Help! Help! There's been an accident." Everything inside Jake shifted. The jovial atmosphere shattered instantly, replaced by immediacy and fear. What had just begun to feel like a pivotal moment with Mark now spun precariously into chaos. Jake exchanged a glance with his brother. With urgency flashing in his eyes, he knew they would both need to face what awaited them beyond that porch together. Could this unexpected incident bring a new understanding between the brothers? Or would it unveil deeper divisions in their relationship? Only time would tell. Jake's heart raced as he darted down the steps from the porch, Mark right behind him. The sound of muffled cries led them towards the chaos unfolding in the street. The crisp winter air was filled with urgency, blending the sweetness of pine from the decorations with a pungent odor of spilled gasoline and burnt rubber. Bright lights flickered like stars above them, flashing from emergency vehicles blocking the road as they approached. Jake caught a glimpse of the scene: a small car crumpled against a snowbank, a figure slumped inside. Panic surged through him. He recognized the vehicle. It belonged to Mrs. Jensen, the sweet old lady from a few streets over who always brought him cookies at Christmas. "Stay back!" an officer shouted as they neared, the tension on his face a clear sign of the gravity of the situation. Jake felt a surge of helplessness. But he was no stranger to cars. Instinct kicked in. "I know how to help," he called out, pushing past the gathering crowd. Mark hesitated for a moment but quickly followed, determination edging his expression. The officer looked skeptical but nodded. "All right, then move aside and give us room." Jake squeezed into the small space beside the car, heart pounding. "Mrs. Jensen, can you hear me?" He called out gently, hoping against hope that she would respond. Silence, then a faint moan. Relief flooded through him. He quickly assessed the situation. The steering wheel was pressed against her chest. She was trapped. The air was filled with the acrid smell of leaking fuel, and every instinct told him to act quickly but carefully. "Mark, call for backup," Jake yelled, knowing his brother had a natural knack for taking charge. Mark fumbled with his phone, urgency returning to his face. He started relaying the information to emergency services, eyes darting around to assess the crowd that was growing more restless. "Mrs. Jensen, I'm going to get you out," Jake said, keeping his voice steady as he maneuvered carefully to avoid making the situation worse. "Just hold on. Help is on the way." With slow precision, he began working on the door, bracing it against the mounting pressure. Sweat trickled down his brow. Each second felt like eternity, but he couldn't let fear take over. Just breathe, okay? He urged her, feeling a mix of anxiety and focus. Mark's voice broke through. They're sending an ambulance. Just hang in there, ma'am. Jake glanced around. Concerned faces blended into a blur, but all he saw was Mrs. Jensen. Just a few days earlier, she had shared stories over hot cocoa, her hearty laugh a balm to the long winter nights. He wouldn't let her down. Finally, with a final push, the door creaked open and Jake reached inside, carefully taking her hand. You're okay. Just stay with me. Help is right here. In those frantic moments, everything outside faded: the noise, the cold, the unresolved confrontation with Mark. Just the two of them mattered now. The sound of sirens echoed in the distance, growing closer, and Jake felt a flicker of hope. They would save her. But even as he fought to keep Mrs. Jensen conscious, he could sense Mark's eyes on him, a heavy weight of realization settling in between them. Would this moment bring them together or push them apart further? Just as the ambulance pulled up, Jake felt a wave of uncertainty. Was this the catalyst for change they both needed? Or just another broken moment waiting to happen? But as he glanced at Mark amidst the surrounding chaos, he knew one thing was clear. The conversation they'd put off earlier loomed larger than ever, and it was time to face it. Would they emerge from this night with a stronger bond? Or would it be another chance slipped through their fingers? The ambulance crew rushed in with practiced efficiency, their bright vests like beacons of hope. They took control, swiftly assessing Mrs. Jensen's condition. What do we have? One paramedic shouted, glancing towards Jake. She's trapped. Steered pressed tight against her chest, Jake replied, his voice steady but laced with urgency. He stood off to the side now, heart still hammering, watching them work. It felt weird to be taken out of the action, the reality of being a bystander sinking in. Yet he felt relieved to see professionals taking charge. Mark stood beside him, his face pale, but determination flickered in his eyes. She's going to be okay, right? He murmured, almost to himself. Yeah, she is, Jake replied, more to convince himself than Mark. The paramedics carefully secured Mrs. Jensen with neck braces and began extricating her from the wreckage. Every small movement sent a jolt of fear through Jake. Would she make it? The sounds of sirens blended with the bustling crowd, increasing the pressure in Jake's chest. But there was more than that. Glancing over at Mark, he could feel the weight of the night pressing down on them, an unsaid tension hanging thick in the air. As they pulled Mrs. Jensen from the car, Mark took a step forward, caught up in the moment. Come on, let's stay close. It was an act of solidarity which surprised Jake. He appreciated the gesture yet felt a swell of uncertainty about what was to come next. Let us move. One of the paramedics barked, and they loaded Mrs. Jensen onto the stretcher, her frail frame instantly covered in a silver thermal blanket. Get in the ambulance. We'll take care of her, a paramedic called out, glancing at Jake with a nod. Wait, Jake blurted, feeling a surge of protectiveness. I want to make sure she's all right. She's our neighbor. Mark placed a hand on Jake's shoulder. They'll take good care of her. We've got to catch our breath. We can meet her at the hospital. The shift in focus brought clarity to Jake. He wasn't just dealing with the urgency of the accident. Beneath it all simmered unresolved feelings toward Mark, the things they needed to say to each other. He stole a glance toward the car, now a crumpled shell against the snow. Mrs. Jensen would be okay, but how would he and his brother fare? As the ambulance doors closed, Jake felt an unfamiliar strength rise within him. Mark, we need to talk. About everything, he said, trying to keep his voice firm. Yeah, I know. Mark shoved his hands deep into his pockets, eyes darting away. But not here, all right? Let us just get to the hospital first. A part of Jake wanted to provoke further, but the look in Mark's eyes grounded him. As they turned to follow the ambulance, the reality of what lay ahead loomed. This could change everything between them, but a trickle of doubt dripped into Jake's mind. What if nothing changed? In the car they drove in silence, tension filling the space like a thick fog. Thoughts swirled about Mrs. Jensen, their childhood, the way they had grown into their separate lives. As they neared the hospital, Jake gripped the dashboard, needing to shout all he felt yet finding no words. Jake, Mark started and then paused, unsure. What? Jake snapped, breaking the silence and facing his brother. I just hope Mrs. Jensen is okay. Yeah, and what about us? Jake pressed, catching Mark off guard. Just as Mark opened his mouth, the ambulance screeched to a halt, and the urgency of the moment pulled them back in. The double door swung open and the paramedics moved swiftly, wheeling Mrs. Jensen away. Jake exhaled sharply. They were at a crossroads now, not just for Mrs. Jensen but for them. Would they talk about it? What would they reveal? As they followed, Jake's heart pounded louder. Tonight was only beginning. The answers they were searching for hung in the balance. Would facing the truth bring them closer, or tear them apart once and for all? The fluorescent lights of the hospital flickered above as Jake and Mark rushed through the sliding glass doors. The air was filled with the antiseptic smell of cleanliness, mixed with the faint aroma of coffee from the waiting area. Time felt suspended, each second a lead weight in Jake's chest. They approached the reception desk where a nurse stood typing, her fingers flying over the keyboard. "We're here for Mrs. Jensen," Jake said, his voice cutting through the background noise. She looked up, her expression shifting to one of sympathy. "Yes, please have a seat. The doctors are still assessing her." Mark nodded, but Jake felt the tension mounting between them. He glanced at the rows of uncomfortable plastic chairs, then turned his gaze back to Mark. "We really need to talk." Mark opened his mouth as if to protest, but then sighed heavily instead. "Okay. But let us wait until we hear about Mrs. Jensen." Jake couldn't hold it in anymore. "Why are we always tiptoeing around each other? You know there's more to discuss than just her condition." The warmth in Mark's eyes dimmed slightly, replaced by a defensive flicker. "I'm not ready to talk about everything. Can't we just focus on her right now?" Jake felt a mix of frustration and concern. "That's just it, Mark. If we don't talk now, when will we? I can't keep pretending that we're fine when things are so messed up." A tense silence lingered between them, words hanging unspoken. Jake felt a swell of emotion, afraid that if he didn't push now, they'd ignore this moment like they had so many others. Before Mark could respond, a doctor in a white coat emerged from the hallway, wiping his hands on his scrubs. "Mrs. Jensen is stable. She's awake and asking for you," he said, offering a faint smile. Relief washed over Jake, his heart lightening just a little. "Thank you. Can we see her?" "Of course, follow me," the doctor replied, leading them down another corridor. As they walked, Jake felt Mark's hand brush against his. The contact was almost electric, sparking both anxiety and excitement. When they reached the small room, the sight of Mrs. Jensen lying in a hospital bed with tubes and wires connected to her filled them with mixed emotions. "Jake! Mark!" she exclaimed, her voice weak but filled with warmth as she spotted them. Her eyes lit up, and for a moment, everything else faded. "Mrs. Jensen, thank God. We were so worried about you," Jake breathed, stepping closer. Mark stood beside him, his expression softer now, glancing at Jake with gratitude for the moment's reprieve. This was what was important: their neighbor's health. They sat at her bedside, sharing small talk infused with sincere relief and scattered laughter over shared memories. But as the conversation continued, Jake could feel the underlying tension from earlier creeping back in. Every shared smile brought both comfort and a painful reminder of unresolved feelings. After a while, Mrs. Jensen grew quiet, her strength waning. "Boys, I'm so glad you're here. We're always here for you," Jake promised, his voice sincere. "Life's too short to hold back," she whispered, her eyes piercing through to Jake's very core. "You've got to say what you need to say." Jake swallowed hard, feeling the weight of her words settling over him like snow. He glanced at Mark, and the unspoken understanding passed between them. It was time. The moments passed, heavy with unvoiced truths. Jake felt the bubble of emotion rising in his chest. Would they finally confront the distance growing between them? The room felt charged, time ticking slowly, but Jake just needed that final push. Could he be brave enough to expose his heart tonight? And would Mark reciprocate? Jake took a deep breath, preparing for the leap. "Mark, I need to tell you something." But before he could continue, a frantic commotion erupted in the hallway, pulling their attention away from the moment they desperately needed to seize. What would happen now? Would they lose the chance to talk? The commotion outside the room grew louder, voices raised in alarm. Jake's heart pounded in his chest, the moment he had been waiting for slipping through his fingers like sand. He exchanged a worried glance with Mark, uncertainty flashing across both their faces. "Should we?" Jake began, but he didn't finish his sentence. The doctor's earlier smile seemed far away now, replaced with the sudden tension in the air. Just then, a nurse appeared in the doorway, her face taut with urgency. "We need to clear the hallway. If your family, please stay put. Everyone else will need to step outside." Mark's hand gripped Jake's tighter, as the nurse's eyes darted between them. "But someone else fainted and we're handling it." "Is it Mrs. Jensen?" Jake blurted, anxiety creeping into his voice. No, she's stable," the nurse reassured quickly. "Just stay here." Jake nodded, but his thoughts raced. The fear of losing this moment to express what weighed on his heart swirled with concerns for their neighbor. Mark's grip on his hand remained solid, conveying safety amidst the chaos. He shifted slightly, leaning close to Mark, still filled with unspoken words. "Are you scared?" Mark murmured, his voice barely above a whisper, but the vulnerability in it struck deep. Jake took a breath. "A little. But it's not just the hospital. It's everything, the two of us." Mark opened his mouth, ready to respond, but his gaze was suddenly drawn past Jake. He leaned back just enough to see Mrs. Jensen's face, fragile yet glowing with warmth as she watched them. "Boys," she called softly, her voice a gentle reminder to focus. "Don't let fear hold you back. You're stronger than you think." Jake felt chills ripple down his spine. The resonance of her words ignited a spark inside him, a mix of fear and determination. Was this really the moment to confront everything they'd let linger? Before he could process it fully, a new doctor entered the room, his face stern but calm. "Mrs. Jensen, we need to keep you stable. I'll check in after some tests." He made his way over to the bed and began adjusting the monitors around her. A chorus of hurried footsteps echoed outside. Within moments, the nurse who had requested space reappeared, looking drained. "Okay, everyone. We need to move." She gestured for Jake and Mark, guiding them toward the door. "You can return in a moment. Let us clear the way for staff." Jake's heart raced with urgency. This could be the last chance. He turned to Mark, whose eyes mirrored the conflict within him. "We need to talk now." The crowd in the corridor pressed against them, but all Jake could focus on were the unfulfilled answers lingering between them. He stepped closer, leaning toward Mark as the noise grew. "When this is over, I want to lay everything out. No more hiding." Mark's brow furrowed, but he didn't respond. Instead, he just glanced back toward Mrs. Jensen, her smile a haunting reminder of their connection. She was fighting for her health, yet here they were, caught in a standoff of their own. "'Kay, but we can't do it here," Mark finally said, the weight of his words settling heavy. "Promise me we'll find a moment." "We will," Jake interrupted, his determination flaring. "Just hold on to that thought." They stepped out into the bustle of the hallway, the world outside their conversation roaring to life again. Nurses hurried by, patients shuffled along, but for Jake and Mark, everything else faded into the background. The air was thick with unspoken feelings, a mix of urgency and anticipation. What would they say to each other when they finally faced the truth? Could they navigate through fear and doubt into something new? As they found a quiet corner to breathe, Jake knew that beyond the chaos, he was more ready than he had ever been to break free from the walls they had built around themselves. Would they finally put it all on the line? Or would the fear of rejection weigh heavier than their hearts could bear? Jake leaned against the cool wall, the echo of hurried footsteps still swirling in his head. He could feel the anxiety in Mark's presence, as if they were two magnets pulled together, yet stuck in a moment of indecision. What was it going to take for them to finally cross that line? Mark's voice broke through the noise around them, his brow furrowed deeper, the uncertainty plastered on his face. "What do you really want to say?" Jake inhaled sharply, emotions bubbling just beneath the surface. Maybe this was the moment. He looked into Mark's eyes, searching for the courage he hoped was mirrored in them. I don't want fear to hold us back anymore. Not today. Not ever." The weight of Jake's words hung in the air. Mark shifted slightly, his gaze falling momentarily. "It's easy for you to say that, but what if it doesn't go the way we want? What if? What if?" Jake interjected, his heartbeat quickening. "What if it goes worse? But what if it goes better than we ever imagined?" Silence. Mark seemed to mull over Jake's question, his gaze shifting toward the bustling corridor filled with strangers. Yet, in that silence an invisible thread tightened between them. Maybe we do deserve a shot at something more, something real, Mark said cautiously, his voice barely rising above the chaos. Jake felt a surge of hope wash over him. There it was. An opening. But it's so complicated, Mark continued, the weight of those words seeming to hang in the air. With everything going on, with Mrs. Jensen she's fighting for her life, and we're standing here floating in our own worries. It doesn't feel right, but if we don't speak up for ourselves now, when will we? Mark opened his mouth, then closed it again, wrestling with his thoughts. Jake reached out, gently squeezing Mark's hand. It was a silent vow between them, one that spoke volumes. We matter, Mark. What we feel matters. It's time to stop pretending it's not real. Just then, the hurried nurse from earlier passed by again, her stethoscope hanging loosely, a fleeting moment of calm in the current of chaos. She caught Mark's eye, then glanced at Jake, her expression a mixture of exhaustion and empathy. Things can change in a moment, she said softly, as if her words were meant only for them. You can't ignore what's in your heart. Mark's gaze flickered back to Jake, the tension breaking if only slightly. You're right. But how do we even begin? Jake shrugged, an uncharacteristic grin creeping onto his face. We just do. One word at a time. Before Mark could respond, the crowd surged again, pushing a wave of commotion that drew both their attention. A familiar face appeared among the chaos. It was Mrs. Jensen, her frail figure surrounded by nurses, but her spirit shone through. She caught sight of Jake and Mark, her eyes twinkling despite the situation. Remember, boys, don't let fear hold you back. Each word sparked something within Jake, reigniting the fire of determination. In Mrs. Jensen's fragile strength, they found the final push they needed. Can we talk? Just for a moment? Mark broke the silence, a newfound urgency in his tone. Of course. Wherever you want, Jake replied, a thrill of excitement coursing through him. Let us step outside for a bit. As they made their way toward a quieter exit, Jake felt the contrast between the tension of the hospital and a flickering flame of hope igniting in his chest. Maybe this was it, maybe they would finally confront everything hanging between them. But as they reached the door, another shout pierced through the crowd, sending a shiver down Jake's spine. We need help over here. Jake's heart dropped. Would they be able to talk? Would their moment be lost again to something beyond their control? Mark turned to him, eyes wide with realization. What if we don't get a second chance? With everything on the line, how much could they stand to lose if they didn't take that leap? Jake's stomach twisted as chaos erupted around them. Nurses rushed by, their faces a blur of worry, and the atmosphere thickened as the call for help echoed again in the hall. He felt the ground beneath him tilting, uncertainty weighing on his shoulders like a heavy blanket. Should we go see what's happening? Mark asked, glancing toward the commotion. No, Jake said, shaking his head. We can't keep letting everything else dictate our lives. Mark's eyes met his, searching. But what if this is important? What if what we have is important too, Mark? Right now it's about us. His voice grew firmer, the urgency of the moment pushing him. We need to figure out where we stand. Mark hesitated, his brow furrowing deeper. The lines of worry etched on his face made Jake's heart ache. I'm scared, Jake. What if it's not what we hope it is? Then we try again. We face it together. Jake's pulse raced as he felt a spark of conviction flicker within him. I can't keep waiting for the right moment. I want to know what we mean to each other. And I think you deserve to know too. Mark sighed deeply, closing his eyes for a brief moment, as if gathering strength from within. You make it sound so easy. It's difficult, yes, but isn't it worth it? Jake pressed. The noise around them faded slightly, his focus narrowing to the boy in front of him, the one whose heart he wanted to understand fully. With another nurse rushing by, Mark took a deep breath, steadying himself. Okay, but if we're going to do this, we do it right. No holding back. He took a step closer, the air between them crackling with unspoken words. Agreed, Jake replied, his heart thundering. Let us not hide anymore. Just then Mrs. Jensen's words echoed again in Jake's mind, sending a jolt through him. Don't let fear hold you back. She had always championed them, and her spirit seemed to breathe life into their moment. Mark took another deep breath, his eyes locking onto Jake's. So what do I say? How do I even start? Questioning themselves was familiar territory, yet this felt different. Felt alive. You just be honest, Jake encouraged softly. About everything. You don't have to have it all figured out right now. With a nod, Mark clenched his fists, a flicker of determination igniting his features. Right. I'll start. Okay, Jake encouraged, taking a step back to create space, something vital and electric buzzing between them. Mark opened his mouth, words struggling bluntly at the edge of his lips. I like you, Jake. More than friends. It's been there for a while and I'm scared. A rush of warmth filled Jake's chest, and he felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted. I like you too. I always have. Before either could bask in the revelation, the crowd surged again, blocking their path, drawing them back into reality. A loud crash resonated down the hall, followed by frantic voices. A doctor swung by, urgency radiating from him, his eyes scanning the group. Please clear the way. We need everyone to stay calm. It's serious. Jake and Mark exchanged a glance, the thrill of their confession crashing against the sudden wave of panic rising in the air. A moment of triumph turned into confusion and apprehension, as they were swept along by the tide of anxious bodies moving away from danger. Are we really going to let this stop us? Jake asked, his voice raised above the commotion. No, Mark said firmly, determination flickering in his gaze. They were moving closer to the door again, where their words hung in the air, still wrapped in possibility. The scene unfolded in desperate desperation around them, but in that moment, nothing felt as urgent as what had just passed between them. They could either retreat back into the chaos or face whatever lay beyond the door together. As they stepped outside, fresh air greeted them, but a looming uncertainty still hovered. Jake's heart raced with each breath, caught between the exhilaration of confession and the fear of what lay ahead. What if we don't know how to handle this? Mark murmured, fear returning to his eyes. Jake turned toward him, ready to hold tight to this new path they embarked on. Then we'll figure it out together. Whatever happens next, we don't back down. We don't let fear win. But just as the warmth of the hope between them took root, another voice called out from behind them. One single cry piercing through the quiet night air. Jake. Mark. We need you. And with that, their hearts dropped. What awaited them in the unfolding chaos that pulled them back into the whirlwind of uncertainty? Jake's breath quickened as they spun around, the voice cutting through the night like glass. It was Sarah, her face pale, eyes wide with urgency. Please, you have to help. It's Mom. She's collapsed. Time seemed to halt. Jake's heart dropped into his stomach, fear lacing every word. Mark moved instinctively, grabbing Jake's arm. We need to go, he urged, a mix of worry and desperation etched on his features. In that moment, the confessions they just shared felt light years away. Jake felt the weight of panic pressing down on him, mingled with guilt as he stepped forward. What happened? Sarah shook her head, tears forming in her eyes. I don't know. She was getting ready for dinner and then she fell. I think she didn't feel well all day. Mark's grip tightened on Jake. The world around them faded, each second ticking away furiously, and they rushed toward the entrance of the hospital, the shock palpable in the air. Jake's mind raced. Panic for his mother fought against the exhilaration still threading through him from the revelations of only moments before. As they rounded the corner, they ran into a crowd of frantic nurses and doctors, shouting orders, each voice blending into a frenzied cacophony. Jake's heart beat erratically. Would they be too late? He pushed through the throng, Mark close behind him. Please let her be okay, Jake whispered, more to himself than to anyone else. He needed to believe that even in the chaos, she would be fine, that everything happening around him wouldn't strip away what little hope they just built. But as they reached the double doors that led to the emergency area, fear gripped Jake's chest like a vice. He thought of the dinner waiting at home, the laughter over awkward family stories, the warmth of holiday lights. It all seemed so trivial now in the face of this crisis, but was it? Jake. Mark's worried voice pulled him back. We can't just stand here. We need to find someone who can help. A doctor brushed past them and Mark stepped in front. Excuse me. We need to see what's happening with she's being taken care of, the doctor said curtly, not breaking stride. Please step back. Jake felt helpless. They were slipping into shadowy uncertainty again. A dip into the unknown that left them both trembling. No. We can't just wait. We need to know if she's okay. His voice cracked. Mark turned to him, a fire igniting in his eyes. Jake, we have to stay calm, okay? Losing it one tea help your mom. Jake took a shuddering breath, feeling the turmoil mix with the hope they just dared to embrace. They had taken a step into each other's hearts, and now they might lose everything that made that step meaningful. What if she doesn't make it? What if Mark reached for him, words falling softly? We can't go there. We have to believe she will fight. She is strong, just like we are. And in that moment, as tears threatened to spill, Jake realized it wasn't just about fear anymore. It was about hope, the kind that pushed him to hold Mark's gaze, a lifeline amidst the storm. Okay, Jake said, resolving himself. Whatever happens next, we'll face it together. A nurse emerged from the doors, clipboard in hand. Are you family? We need you to come with us. Their hearts sank simultaneously, the promise of chaos unfolding anew. As they followed the nurse, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change once again. Would their newfound connection survive the storm that now battered at the edges of their lives? Would they find something even more profound waiting on the other side of this crisis? As they entered the starkly lit room where their mom lay, a wave of emotion struck Jake like a freight train. She was unconscious, wires connected to her, and the rhythmic beeping of machines echoed in the sterile air. Mark squeezed Jake's hand tightly, grounding him amidst the chaos swirling in his mind. She is strong, remember? He whispered, though uncertainty flickered in his eyes. Jake nodded, trying desperately to hold on to hope. After what felt like an eternity, a doctor stepped in, a look of grim professionalism on his face. She is stable, but we'll need to run some tests. It seems like she is overcome with exhaustion, possibly from the stress of the holidays. Relief flooded through Jake, tinged with concern. Can we see her? He pleaded. Yes, but just for a moment. Stay calm, the doctor replied gently before stepping aside. This was the slice of comfort they desperately needed. Stepping closer to the bed, Jake felt his heart hammer in his chest. His mother's skin looked pale against the crisp white sheets, but her breaths were steady, and for now that was enough. Mom, we're here, Jake said softly, his voice breaking. Feeling Mark's presence beside him fortified his resolve. We love you. As if she sensed their worry, her eyelids fluttered open. It took a moment for her confused gaze to focus on her boys, a smile creeping across her lips. Mark, you're here. Her voice was hoarse but full of warmth. Mom, are you okay? Mark asked urgently, brushing back a stray strand of hair from her forehead like he had done so many times in their childhood. I'm fine, just tired. It's been a long day, she said, her voice steadying. Don't you worry about me. I was thinking about you too and how proud I am. Jake's heart swelled as he glanced at Mark, a wordless understanding passing between them. This was the courage they needed to face their feelings together. It was time to honor not just their mother's strength but their bond as brothers. After a few precious minutes of laughter sharing stories from their childhood, the memories bringing a lightness that pushed the anxiety away, they stepped out as a nurse prepared to take her for more tests. Mom, Jake called, taking a step closer. I'm so sorry for everything. I've been trying so hard to measure up, but I realize now that I just want you to be proud of who I am. She looked at him, her eyes filled with love. You've always made me proud, Jake. You just need to know it. Mark shifted next to him, hesitating. Listen, Mom, Jake and we're working on things together. It's not easy, but we're trying to be more honest with each other. His mother smiled knowingly, as if she had long waited for this moment. That's all I ever wanted for you too. Don't hide from each other any longer. Life is too short. Just keep talking. As they stepped out of the room together, a weight lifted slightly from their shoulders. The tension that had held them down began to ease. Jake, Mark started, stopping in the hallway where fluorescent lights buzzed above them. I know we've got a lot to work through, but I want you to know I care about you. More than I've ever said. Jake felt a rush of warmth in his chest, the kind that chased away the regret of unspoken words. I care about you too, Mark. And I'm tired of pretending everything is fine when it's not. We're brothers. We need to face this together. They stood there for a moment, the weight of their thoughts hanging in the air, yet somehow feeling lighter. No more hiding, Mark agreed, determination blooming in his voice. But before they could get lost in that next conversation, they both heard a commotion in the hallway. Voices raised, the sound of an angry confrontation echoing. "We need help in here." Now, as they turned to look, fear rushed through Jake again, a reminder of how quickly chaos could return. But amidst that anxiety, he felt Mark's hand find his again, and it gave him strength. "Together, right?" Mark asked, steady and grounding. "Always," Jake promised, feeling the rush of determination swell inside him as they made their way toward the noise. Ready to face whatever awaited them, he realized they would emerge from this stronger. The bond of truth was forming between them, a feeling they didn't want to lose again. No matter the chaos, they would deal with it side by side. And just like that, within the turmoil anticipated from every corner, a sense of hope glimmered ahead. Jake and Mark looked at each other, ready to face the world with newfound strength. They weren't just brothers anymore. They were allies. Tonight had changed everything. This is where their story took a vivid turn, a turning point that would bring them closer, ignite their truths, and help them step into a future where they wouldn't ever allow fear to hold them back again. They stepped forward, resolute in their choice to embrace authenticity. Families could be messy, the world outside chaotic, but they had each other. And that was all that mattered. Now don't let this feeling slip away. You need to subscribe now so you won't miss our next story. This is the moment to show your support. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and keep the good vibes flowing. Comment below how this story touched you, what you think of Jake and Mark's transformation, and share this video instantly with at least 5 friends who need to see this inspiring journey. Don't wait not even one more second. Your action makes a difference.